Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all my Artifact Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for October 2021. A lot of you have been asking actually for a pure Artifact deck profile. Those of you that know the Artifacts are familiar with them being mostly side deck cards that are used with Artifact Sanctum, including ones like Artifact Scythe and Lancia to prevent your opponent from doing specific moves in the game. But there's so much more to the actual artifacts for Yu-Gi-Oh! They are monsters that you can basically set in the spell and trap card zone, and then when they are destroyed, special summon them onto the field. They have an Xyz monster, a Link monster. There are so many different cards for this deck that I was definitely excited while building it because it's a fun deck to utilize because it's one that's definitely unlike any of the other ones we have currently in Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the main deck Artifact monsters, I'm running 3 Artifact Moreltak. This is definitely one of the best Artifact cards to use in this deck. And like all the different Artifact cards, you can set this card from your hand to your spell and trap card zone as a spell. And during your opponent's turn, if this set card in the spell and trap card zone is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon this card. And if it is special summoned during your opponent's turn, you can destroy one face-up card your opponent controls. So it doesn't even limit you to monsters. It's just a face-up card. So if your opponent has a field spell, continuous spell, trap, you name it, this card can take out that card quite easily, and you have plenty of different cards in the deck to basically make it so your opponent will destroy your back row, including cards like Artifact Durandal and our new Link monster for that setup being Artifact Dagda. So you have all these cards to go into, and it all just comes down to you being able to set up all these different special summons for your artifacts. For one of the other 3 ofs we run in the deck, a very familiar one, and that is Artifact Lancia. This one is great just for the banish option. It definitely does shut down your opponent's plays if they are unable to banish, and this one gives you more of a hand option, just like a lot of you are familiar with this card being the go-to hand trap artifact. I run 3 of this card. I was adjusting the numbers between this card and Artifact Scythe, so when we get to Scythe we can go over the actual ratio numbers for 3 ofs and 1 ofs we run in the deck. But I like 3 Lancia, so you always have this option to prevent your opponent, since there are a lot of different cards that banish in the game currently, so being able to prevent that against your opponent definitely does pop up with this card. And I also run 3 Artifact Vajra. This one is another setup one. You can set this card from your hand into the spell and trap card zone as a spell. And if it is set in the spell and trap card zone and destroyed, you can special summon it. If this card is special summoned during your opponent's turn, destroy all cards in your opponent's spell and trap card zone. And when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand. So once again, just like Lancia, this is another go-to card from your hand onto the field. If your opponent attacks directly, you can special summon this card and just take out all of your opponent's back row. It is very, very scary for that. It doesn't have to be set up like a set card. It can just be used as a special summon option against your opponent. And then, yes, your opponent can attack into it, but you're mostly going to use it for that resource of being the final attack against your opponent when they declare the direct attack to special summon it. You'll still take the direct attack, but it's a special summon, and it can just get rid of a lot of resources your opponent may have already set up on the field. I also run 3 Artifact Chakram with this one. During your opponent's turn, when it is destroyed, you can special summon it. And during either player's turn, when a card or effect is activated that would destroy a spell or trap card you control, while this card is in your hand, you can return 1 set spell or trap you control to the hand to special summon this card. So more protection if you don't have the particular artifact card on the field that you want to destroy against your opponent. I like running this card as just that way to protect those cards, even giving us potential ones to add back to our hand to special summon via other ways. So it's one of the last 3 ofs I run in the deck, just being overall good numbers to not just have for the set card on the field setup, but from the actual hand to utilize to protect your other artifacts. For some of the lower numbers for the artifact cards, I also run 2 Artifact Fail Not. With this one, having the destruction only for a special summon. If it's special summoned during your opponent's turn, you can target 1 artifact monster in your graveyard and set that target in your spell and trap card zone as a spell card. So with it, this is recycle power for all the different artifacts. You will use them for extra deck resources, whether it is to go into Durandal or any of your Link monsters, but having a recycle option in the form of Artifact Fail Not is a great card to rely on. I only run 2 of this card though. It doesn't really do much early game when you don't have that many artifacts set up in your graveyard yet, but it's perfect at 2 for that to rely on for what it's meant to do late game. And I also run 2 Artifact Labrys, another protection card with this one. When it's special summoned and when an artifact card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. So if your opponent does in fact get over some of the other artifacts we mentioned, being able to at least sit on Artifact Labrys as another special summon onto the field will at least keep the level 5 options, which are the majority of all of the artifacts, for you to use on the field against your opponents. For the one-ofs for the artifact cards, I run one artifact, a Shell Shield. This one is a protection one where your opponent cannot target artifact monsters you control for attacks for the rest of this turn. So this one is an answer to having your artifacts at least safe on the field against your opponent. And also the same goes for artifact Aegis, being for card effects, the same concept as Achilles Shield, except for card effects. And lastly, the one artifact Scythe. This is for stopping the special summons from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. Now, if you want to increase the number of Scythe, you can always mix and match the number of Lancia you run for the number of Scythe you run on the deck. You can always drop the number of Lancia down to 2 and then run 2 Scythe instead of the one-ofs numbers. It's more particular, a great shutdown card, especially if you even wanted to run 3-ofs of this card right here and there. You can take out Aegis and Achilles Shield, or even the 2 Labrys as an option for running 3 Scythe. Once again, just going for more of the shutdown plays we spoke of against your opponent, but we really do see those plays in the form of Lancia stopping the banish, so this could be another spot, like I said, to replace in for artifact Scythe. And that's it for the artifact monsters. For a little more generic level 5 support, I also run 2 Cyber Dragon and 2 Solar Windjammer, being level 5 monsters that you can easily special summon onto the field if you control no monsters. So with this special summon and then relying on the additional artifact cards to summon out onto the field, that gives you the 2 level 5 monsters to then go into your rank 5 monsters, which are all pretty generic, including Artifact Durandal, which just needs 2 level 5 monsters. And that is it for the main deck monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. I run 3 Artifact Ignition. With this card, if you have an artifact monster in your deck, you target 1 spell or trap on the field, destroy that target. If you do, set 1 artifact monster from your deck to your spell and trap card zone as a spell. And if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, your opponent skips their next battle phase. So this is another scary card to set up on the field, because 1, you'll take away from what your opponent's main way of winning the game against you. And with it, you have a way to destroy your opponent's card while also setting up the main go-to playstyle of the deck, which are your different artifact monsters. So it's a definite 3 of being a quick play spell. It's just a great card to rely on for that activation against your opponent. For also the fact that the artifact monsters are all fairy, we are running 3 Celestial Transformation. You special summon 1 fairy monster from your hand, and that monster's attack is halved and is destroyed during the end phase. But this is still a special summon of an artifact monster on the field. So just another way to kind of psych out your opponent by activating your Celestial Transformation, special summoning that fairy monster from your hand. And also, if you special summon it during your opponent's turn, you'll still get the special summon activated effect of the artifact monster, even if it wasn't set on the field. Your opponent may try to, let's say, banish this set card instead of destroying it, and then that's when you can just psych them out, activate Celestial Transformation, and get out the artifact from your hand anyway. And also for the spells, I still run the 2 Twin Twister. This is a great destruction option, not just for your cards, but for your opponent's back row also. It all comes down to the option you want to play using this card. You can either destroy 1 card of yours and 1 card of your opponent's, and giving you that discard into the graveyard can help set up other cards for cards like Artifact Failnaught. For the last of the one-ofs for the spells, I run 1 Instant Fusion, a level 5 fusion target, so we have easier Xyz monsters to go into, Monster Reborn, more special summoning resources onto the field, and 1 Pot of Avarice to recycle all the different artifact monsters we run back into the deck, including the extra deck monsters, since we are running a limited number of those. And that is it for the spells. Moving on now to the traps. Probably one of the best artifact cards in the entire game is Artifact Sanctum. You special summon 1 artifact monster from your deck. If this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can target 1 card on the field, destroy that target. You can activate 1 Artifact Sanctum per turn, and you cannot conduct your battle phase of the turn you activate this card. But it's mostly going to be activated on your opponent's turn. This is just your direct access to cards like Artifact Scythe, Moral Attack, depending on what you need, whether it's a destruction against your opponent, the restriction of your opponent from banishing, or just shutting down your opponent's extra deck in total. You have all these options at your disposal with your Artifact Sanctum. And then also being able to just give you a special summon is another resource to use with, let's say, some of the generic monsters you may just special summon out into the field. If your opponent destroys this card, you can chain an activation, Sanctum, and then gain the special summon. Also, the additional destruction of a card on your opponent's field. Moral Attack can handle the face-up card destructions, while Sanctum can take care of the other card. And then I also run 3 Call the Haunted to finish off the traps and the main deck. This is just another answer if you have plenty of artifacts in your graveyard. Your opponent will be very afraid if you activate this, giving you an artifact from the graveyard to special summon back onto the field, and gaining the special summon effect if it was on your opponent's turn of the artifact you summoned. And that is it for the main deck, we'll now move on to the extra deck. Our go-to Xyz monster is Artifact Durandal. Running 2 of this card. Once per turn, quick effect, you can activate one of these effects. When a monster effect is activated on the field, or when a normal spell or trap card is activated, you can detach 1 material from this card. The activated effect becomes, you can basically destroy 1 spell or trap your opponent controls. So you're making your opponent's monsters or spell and traps, make it so they have to destroy a card on your field. Basically going for the resolution of your artifact cards being destroyed, and then special summoning them, and then gaining their monster effects. Or you can detach 1 material from this card. Each player with a hand shuffles their entire hand into the deck, then draws the same number of cards shuffled into the deck. So another recycle power for, let's say, getting artifacts you prefer to summon out with other cards like Artifact Sanctum, using this second one. But most of the time, I set up Durandal on the field so that I can then have just my opponent destroy any of the set cards I use on the field. For more of the generic Xyz monsters, I also run 1 number 61 Volcasaurus, 1 Wind-Up Arsenal Zenmao. Both of these great destruction options against my opponent, and the 1 Gaia Dragon the Thunder Charger, another way to just overlay on top of the level 5 monsters. So then I have a monster with piercing on the field after I've used up those Xyz materials, and really just have a generic card on the field. Moving on now to the Link monsters, I run 2 Artifact Dagda. You need 2 monsters with different names, which can easily be done in this deck. When the effect of another card on the field is activated, quick effect, you can set 1 artifact monster from your hand or deck to your spell and trap card zone as a spell, but destroy it during your opponent's next end phase. And during your opponent's turn, if this Link summon card is destroyed, you can special summon 1 artifact monster from your graveyard in defense position. You can only use each effect of Dagda once per turn. Answers, answers, answers. This is what this card has for all of your opponent's cards. You have the set option for your artifacts, but not only that, it'll be set and destroyed at your opponent's end phase, meaning once it's destroyed, you gain a special summon, and then another option on the field for you to use against your opponent, and another resource for you to use for your Xyz plays following your turn. Having the Link monster on the field gives you those options, but also if your opponent were to try and destroy Dagda, which it has 1500 attack, meaning it can be easily done, you will then have another artifact on the field ready to use against them. For more of the generic Link monsters, I also run 1 Lena the Light Charmer and 1 Hip Hoshinengen, both being light attribute, and the majority of the main deck being all light attribute monsters. I also run 1 Underclock Taker. This is in here for mostly being able to lower my opponent's monster's attack so I can hit over them with the artifact cards I run. Also 1 Nightmare Cerberus, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, and 1 Borreload Dragon to finish off the Link monsters. And lastly, for the instant fusion target, the 1 Sea Monster of Theseus being the level 5 monster of choice, just so I have another resource on the field to overlay, being, like I said, very, very generic for all the rank 5 monsters I run in the deck. As for your go-to plays, this is really a deck where you try and fake setting up back row against your opponent. So depending on what you have in your hand and what you just set against your opponent will definitely make them afraid to either destroy your back row. And even if that's not the case, you have other ways of destroying it, or at least special summoning out your artifacts onto the field, giving you destruction plays against your opponent with the said artifact cards you run, and then also giving you more cards to set up, as well as special summons. And even if your opponent were to try and avoid just destroying them in total, you have answers against your opponent to summon out cards onto the field. If your opponent attacks directly, you can summon out Artifact Vajra. Then you can go for the Artifact Sanctum special summon, then summoning out an artifact of choice onto the field. Moral Attack can destroy a monster or a face-up useful card that your opponent was using. And with it, then you can overlay the 2 together into your Artifact Durandal. Or if you wanted to go for the other option, you have the Link 2 play. But most of the time, I still like to go for Durandal. It all depends. If you don't have the back row to use, then you go for the Link monster. If you have the back row ready to go and set up, then you go for Durandal, because then you'll want your opponent to destroy anything you have set up, taking that risk of them hitting one of your artifacts, giving you another special summon on the field for you to use against them. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoy the video. I actually had a lot of fun looking back at the artifact deck. It may just be used at times as a side deck resource for a lot of people, or just an answer to your opponent using all the different artifact monsters, but it can really be a fun deck to use also as a pure variant using all the different artifact monsters we have. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.